Howdy, rock stars. This episode is dedicated to the memory of the late Rob Reiner, the great and visionary film producer who brought us both Spinal Tap I and Spinal Tap II, The End Continues. He died tragically shortly after I did this interview with Steve Genewick, and I hope you enjoy hearing the story of the making of this incredible film. I know that for me, Spinal Tap I and II have been milestones in my journey in music. So thank you for listening, and this episode goes out to you, Rob. Cheers. This episode of RSR is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, and Grace Design. These are tools that I use every day in my studio, from the Spectra 1964, STX 600, 100, and 100D, and Native Instruments Complete 15, to Isotope Ozone and RX, and the central hub for my studio, the Grace Design M701 audio interface. Follow the sponsor links in the show notes. Grab my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and remember to like this video and subscribe on YouTube because it's a great way to help support this show. Now, get ready to rock. How did Nigel's radio broadcaster for his guitar rig go in the studio?
He had all kinds of wacky stuff, yeah.
Did he really bring wacky stuff into the studio too?
Yeah, because some of it had to be on this, it's Nigel, so you have to have those things. So there were some pedals that, Chris might not use in his, when he's just sitting at home playing guitar. I mean,
that was part of the movie too. Remember, he's playing I don't remember what it was, some kind of warbly pedal. And then, David St. Hubbins is like, you're not going to use that in the song, are you?
Yeah, like the pizza pedal. That was all there.
Pedal, exactly.
Yeah, it was there. I mean, I saw it. It was there. And the guitar awesome. With the cheese. I mean, look, if you haven't seen the movie by now, I'm not blowing it. But, that's a real guitar. We used it.
That's awesome,
on the record.
Man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, rock stars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Steve Genewick, Grammy-winning recording and mix engineer with 30 years in studios like Capitol, Abbey Road, and La Fabrique. He's worked 20 years alongside Al Schmidt on records like Diana Krall, Paul McCartney, Neil Young, and Quincy Jones, to name just a few. A Dolby Atmos pioneer, he mixed also for Beck, Sam Smith, and Apex Legends, among many others. And most recently, he co-mixed the soundtrack for Spinal Tap II, The End Continues, which I'm excited to talk about on this podcast. Steve also has won the Pensado Award for Best Recording Engineer and helped develop Universal Audio's Neve 88RS emulation, as well as the Capitol Reverb plugin, which we talked about last time. Steve's been on the show before in episodes 231 and 447, and a big thank you, as always, to my brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau, for making our original introduction. I believe that was you, Matt. Please welcome Steve Genewick back to Recording Studio Rockstars. Steve, my man, are you ready to rock yet again?
We're ready to rock again.
Glad to have you here, dude. So I think you're joining us from your current Atmos mixing room, yeah?
Yep, exactly. And you were here about a month ago, right? A little less?
Yeah. I mean, this of course will come out later, but I was able to stop by and visit you, and it was really cool. I mean, you played some pretty awesome stuff when I was there, man. I got to listen to Miles Davis, and even more remarkably, I got to listen to the new Spinal Tap in Atmos. It was so cool, dude.
It's fun. Good. I'm glad you had fun. It was a fun night, actually. Matt was here. Romo was here. It was fun.
Yeah. We stopped by with Matt Boudreau and Michael Romanowski, both from the Bay Area.
They needed a ride, so they came here. And
that's right. Yeah. We really came to see your studio, Steve. We didn't just need a ride. It's one of the tricky things about visiting Los Angeles is it can be a little bit hard to get around sometimes. It seems like it's just one city, so like, oh, come on over, but
it's a lot of little cities, and it's really spread out. Depending on where you have to go. Sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's an hour and a half. So, which is why I like working here. It's a, 40-second commute if I work slow.
From one part of the house to the other. Yeah. So describe your studio setup, if you would. I mean, it's a really cool setup, and it really struck me that it feels very, welcoming.
Thanks. I mean, it's my house. So, I mean, long story short, I always had a little tiny studio here. Just I could do editing and stuff like that as Pro Tools came along and things got less expensive and more compact. So and I could mix budget projects and stuff like that. And then when COVID hit, we all had to go home. So it was actually my wife's idea. So we kind of had flip-flopped and took everything out of our living room, which we didn't use that much. We have a nice sized family room in the back of the house. So this became my COVID mixing room. And like within a week of lockdown, I had a full Dolby Atmos room in here.
Wow.
Luckily at the time I was still working for Universal. So I had help with them and Dolby and all my contacts. So it was pretty simple to get it up. And I had been mixing in Atmos for a long time at that point. So,
right. So you already, it's like setting up, it'd be the equivalent of us just whipping up a stereo mix setup or
exactly.
something.
Yeah. Mine just had more speakers. It was the exact same thing. And it was kind of nice. And I kind of liked working at home. And the room actually sounds really good without any treatment, really. I didn't hardly do anything. And then when we found out Capitol was going to shut down because they're doing earthquake renovations on the building and that I suddenly was not going to have a studio home anymore, it was, well, let's just upgrade the home studio. And, so I mean, it's you saw it's a real studio. I mean, everything here is top notch. I've got PMC speakers and, Avid S1s and the whole 9 yards. So, but it happens to be in my living room. And I've been mixing here for the last 4 years or whatever it is. So it's great. I love it.
Yeah. I feel like off to the side, I see what looks like a fireplace. And I remember when I was there, you've also got bookshelves and fun stuff to look at if you look over the computer where you're mixing, you see all fun, everything from collectible baseballs to whatever else you got, other knickknacks.
Yeah, just the junk you collect over the years. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. People don't come over that often. Most mixing is now remote. So, but when people come over, it's kind of fun to have some of that stuff laying around. So,
yeah.
Where else are you going to put it, right?
Yeah, you've got a couple of comfy chairs in the back. And so Matt and I were goofing around after, on that same trip, I think we were sort of discovering Grok AI and some of the little funny tools that it has in there for making a video out of something. And so we were just goofing back and forth. And we were like joking about being in your studio and like, oh yeah, getting up and dancing around and accidentally knocking over the speakers in the back of your room, which that didn't happen. We were joking about it.
No.
And of course it like whips up a video for us where it makes us look like we actually did that. I was just like dying. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to knock over the speakers.
How many speakers do you have in your setup there?
I have a 714 system. So I have 3 PMC 6.2s in the front, and I have 4 PMC results around the sides, and I have PMC wafers in the ceiling, and a subwoofer. So this is the most. I mean, I can't fit any more speakers in here. There's just physically not enough room. So everybody's like, should I have 914? If I had 9, the speakers would be touching. It's not a big room, but it's big enough. I mean, and it translates, which is nice. And I, lucky enough, because of my relationships, I had Dolby come and tune the room for Atmos. So it's all tuned and timed and all that kind of stuff, which for Atmos is actually very important. The timing is the most important thing, making sure you have all your delays right so that when you're sitting in your mix position, all the speakers are hitting you at the same time. Because I think, to my knowledge, like when I talk to the guys at Dolby, they're like, wow, we've tuned rooms all over the world. He said, I think there's like 1, maybe 2 rooms where all the speakers are actually equidistant, because no room lays out that way. There's always a door or a window or whatever. So, my rear speakers are a little farther back than the front speakers, stuff like that. But that's what you have to do to make it work,
And
no
so does that sometimes affect the timing of, does that ever affect a noticeable latency in what you see on the screen versus reaching your ears, or is it, infinitesimal timing that's smaller than that?
It's milliseconds, So and you're timing it to the closest speaker. So like my front speakers are probably the closest ones to me. So so if I'm mixing a film or something like that, what I'm seeing on the screen, there's no latency to it, which is nice.
So it would,
at least none that I can see. There may be latency in the system, but but everything is delayed. So
So would Pro Tools know about that, or the render would know about that in such a way that it would feed you the back speakers a little bit sooner, so that it reached your ear at the same time as the front speakers?
Exactly. Yeah, it all happens in the Dadman software. Yeah,
Dadman.
So it's after Pro Tools, after the renderer in Dadman. Which
are you glad that they named it Dadman? Does that just sort of feel a little bit empowering as a dad and a man?
I guess so. Yeah. Then they have the little monitor controller is the Dad Mom.
Dad Mom, nice.
I don't have one of those, but yeah. It's Dante. It's Dante Audio. And again, every time I say Dante, I get a little headache, because if you've never tried to set it up, it's kind of a pain in the ass when you first get to it.
It's the Dante's Inferno continues.
They put the outputs where the inputs should be and the inputs where the outputs should be. So it's kind of backwards.
Oh man, those routing grids always just kind of made my head spin until I finally figured it out.
And once in a while, like I just got a new upgrade to my interface. I had to go in and try to get it to work, and it was like, I haven't looked at this in 4 years. Like, oh my God. It took a minute.
I know that's one of the challenges with what we do in the studio. Sometimes there are things that we do that are really complex, but we only have to do it once and then not do it again for quite a long time. And the challenge for me is always, when I come back to have to do it again, I'm like, do I have to start from ground zero, or is there a way to pick up where I left off? Do you have any techniques for you? Is it just memory, or do you sort of have your own note-taking methods where you remind yourself of how you did things in the past?
I'm horrible at it. Every time I have to do it, I have to go back and start from scratch. And, I got so spoiled working at Capitol. We had a great maintenance staff. So if something needed fixing or something was broken, I just picked up the phone. I was like, guys, this is broken. There's no sound coming out of the speakers, and people would show up and fix it. And so
somebody walks in and grabs the volume knob and turns it slightly and goes, how about that?
At times, yeah. Did you unplug it and plug it back in? But now that I'm essentially a studio owner, I have to do it all myself. So that's why it's great, having friends, and this community we have is so cool. Because, I've had times where I had to try something. Like I remember I was setting up the system I use for remote recording. And I was like, I texted Matt. I'm like, you got 5 minutes? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, do this. And we set up a quick, remote session. So you got to have friends, because we're not in studios anymore. It was great, working at places like Capitol or East West, or, there's multiple rooms. I was at a studio yesterday. I ran into people in the hallways. I love that. And we don't have it anymore. We sit in rooms by ourselves,
Yeah, the level of knowledge you can exchange over lunch is pretty remarkable.
Exactly.
Unless there's a rule, no talking about gear at lunch. It depends on what lunch you go to, right?
Depends on which lunch you're in, yeah. Usually in the studio, we're not talking about gear, unless somebody asks.
Yeah.
Sometimes the musicians will ask about stuff, because, I have my studio at the house. Okay, here's free tech support.
Right.
and I'm horrible at tech support, so I'm usually like, I don't know, go ask the maintenance guys,
Well, I remember being in, at Smart Studios in the 90s when I was starting out there and going upstairs, and Mr. Paulson, I think that was what he went by. And, over a break, he's like, "Oh, dude, Pro Tools was brand new." And he was like, "Oh, you got to get a trackball, man. Trackball's where it's at." And so he got me turned on to that. And then I've continued to use them. And now other people come along, they're like, "That's insane, man. I hate trackballs,
I know. I love them, though. I have 2 or 3 of them. I travel with one because most studios have the expert mouse that we all use.
Yeah,
and
that's what I've got.
I have my 4 buttons set up to do my, very basic stuff, but I have the two bottom buttons. If I hit them at the same time, it disables my groups in Pro Tools, which is really great. But if I forget to set it up at another studio, I'll hit the buttons and something weird will happen. Whatever the last guy had is, suddenly I've changed all my playlists or whatever it is.
So you might appreciate this. Well, so if you've been using it for a long time, like I have, so Rockstars, this is the Kensington trackball. It's called the Expert Mouse, and it's a big, I don't know if you can see it on my camera. I can't lift it up high enough. There it is.
There you go.
But it's a big cue ball looking thing with 4 buttons on it and a rotary scroll wheel. And way back, if you go all the way back to OS 9, do you remember that, Steve? You could actually program it like ad nauseum. You could do any button combo with it, and so you could get like 100 different commands out of it, or something. I'm not doing. I don't know if I passed the binary test in math class, but you get a lot of combos out of it. And then along came OS 10, and then they broke all that, and so you were down to just 4 buttons. And then they sort of broke it again recently for me, where it's not showing up. But I found a great substitute. There's an app, a free one on the Mac called Steer Mouse, STEER Mouse. And you download that, and as long as that's running, you have like massive programmability again, and it totally works. So you might check that out if you didn't know about it.
I didn't. See, that's why we got to do these things, so I can find out new
exactly.
stuff. I was listening to maybe it was Matt's podcast, and somebody mentioned a piece of software, and I was like, "That's what I've been looking for." And a half hour later, I had solved one of my problems.
And it was called PayPal,
great.
Pay Me button.
Yeah, exactly. Venmo, yeah.
Venmo. It was called Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, well, let's see. What I'm looking over your shoulder there, and it looks like. Do I see Christmas decorations in the background too on the mantelpiece?
Not Christmas. No, just kind of fall. It's Thanksgiving
fall.
time.
All right, dig it. All right, all right, cool.
Yeah. Were they not up when you were here? They might not have been. Yeah.
Well, I remembered you mentioning
after Thanksgiving, we'll do Christmas, but
right. Well, of course, that'll date us a little bit. But you were talking about one of the projects you were working on was with Trisha Yearwood. Is that a new one?
Yeah, I believe it just came out this week. So it's a Christmas record. I always joke I spend my summers making Christmas records. So it's part of what I do. I end up doing a lot of Christmas records. Partially because I do big band records and orchestral records and, string sections, and those tend to fall into those kind of, arranged albums. So, this year I think I did parts of 4 Christmas records. But yeah, the one we did with Trisha, that's kind of the biggest one I did this year. So it was Trisha Yearwood, Don was the producer. David Campbell wrote all the arrangements. And we recorded at the Warner Brothers scoring stage, so one of the big scoring stages here in town. And it was fun. It was, a rhythm section, drums, bass, at times 2 guitars, at times 2 keyboard, piano player and a celeste player, and then a big orchestra, anywhere from between probably 55 and 70 people, depending on the day and the songs we were doing. And it was all live. She sang live, and, it's great. I love doing those records. They're so much fun because you're literally starting from scratch. Like, you open a Pro Tools session and there's nothing in it. No click, no tempo maps, no nothing. And you just record. And an hour later, it's like, wow, we're done with that one. Cool. And
wow.
It's finished because it hits you coming out of the speaker. It's a lot of work at the beginning. My work is done before the session starts. I'm figuring out where people are going to go and what mics we're going to use, and it's all set up the day before usually. And on the scoring stages, the crews there are great. So there's a lot of people. Not a lot of people. There's probably 3 or 4 people, along with myself. And then, once the session hits, there's copyists and contractors and, people that help the musicians. And so it's a lot of people, but I love those sessions. They're so much fun, so, but it's all, on my end, it's all preparation.
Yeah. So you're actually going out and planning out the microphones and all that kind of stuff as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then
and you of course have had a lot of experience with that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, working at a place like Capitol. Absolutely. I love doing those kind of sessions, those big band sessions.
Is it fair to dive into some of the details on that right now? Some of the stuff you remember?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that stuff's fascinating.
From that particular record, absolutely. I mean, that record, again, it was strings, so we probably had like 16 or 18 violins. I think we had 6 violas, 6 cellos, 3 basses, at times, a full double woodwind section, so 8 legit woodwinds, clarinets, oboes, bassoons, that kind of stuff. And then a full brass section, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, tubas, between 2 and 4 French horns. I had 3 percussionists playing different stuff. Pete Erskine played drums. Matt Chamberlain actually came in one day, played drums. I had a piano. I had a celeste, 2 separate players at different times, upright bass. At a couple times, 2 guitar players, George Deering and Dean Parks, and this is all live. So there's no overdubs. I don't think we overdubbed anything. A harp, always a harp.
And what was the studio for this?
The Warner Brothers scoring stage. It's the Eastwood stage on the Warner Brothers lot. So it's on the movie lot.
It's a big room, right?
It's enormous, yeah.
Rock stars, if you want fresh song ideas, Complete 15 from Native Instruments has the tools to kickstart your creativity. With Contact 8's Chords tool, you can generate and customize chord progressions instantly for songwriting. And the Phrases tool gives you ready-to-go melodic inspiration right at your fingertips. With 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds, Complete 15 helps you turn blank pages into music. Pair that with a Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off.
I mean, I had 60, 70 people with rhythm section and 3 percussionists, and there was plenty of room. We could have gotten a lot more in there. You can easily fit 100. You could fit 100-piece orchestra in there very easily.
Wow.
And they're used to it. They do this stuff every day. So big console, Neve 88R, which I'm very used to and I love.
You helped make a plugin for it.
I helped. Yeah, exactly. I've used them a lot, so they're one of my favorites. I'm very biased to Neve consoles. Neves and APIs are my thing. So yeah, it's fun. And again, I think we did 4 days of orchestral recording for 12 songs, and she did vocals for maybe 2 days. She sang live. If we had used her live vocal, it would have been perfectly fine. But there were a couple things she wanted to kind of go back and just look at. But she would do like 3 takes of a song, like straight through. And then we'd comp from there. And usually it was, take this verse from here and that, wasn't like surgical comps like we all know we can get into. I wasn't cutting syllables and stuff like that. And I don't really remember tuning anything. Maybe a word here or there, but nothing, and that probably would have come up like in a mix while we were mixing, like, that note's a little flat. So just.
Right. Well, when you think about orchestral stuff too, I mean, she was probably isolated from the orchestra in the singing part.
Yeah. So she was in a booth and the drums were in a booth.
And like
everybody
on
else
a Frank Sinatra session, he would have been isolated as well, right? That's
on a Sinatra session, not really. On a Sinatra session, he probably was in the room.
Yeah. Really? Wow. Okay.
He might have had like gobos in front of him, But yeah, I've seen a lot of the actual pictures from the actual recording sessions. A lot of times when you see stuff on the back of old records, it might be this recording session, but that's probably not where he was standing exactly. Right, stuff like that. Right. Sometimes they're a little staged, but at Capitol they had a huge photo archive, so we could go in and actually look at the real photos from the actual recording session. So he usually kind of next to the conductor. And once in a while we still do that. Like I've done a couple records with Michael Bublé where he was standing right next to the conductor singing. We did a thing with Neil Young.
Well, and that makes it. Then you can't manipulate the vocals separately from the orchestra at that point too, right?
Nope, not at all. Yeah. That's the thing is I've had artists who were, I remember getting a call from Michael Bublé one day, and this was a few years ago, probably this particular phone call was probably 10 or 12 years ago, and he said, look, I want to do this record, but I want to sing with the band. I want to be in the room. Okay, fine. That's what you want to do. We'll do that. Here's the limitations. We're not going to be able to tune stuff. If we're going to edit, we got to edit everybody. If we're going to, but he's a great singer, so he can do that. So it wasn't a problem. And again, we would do multiple takes, and if we had to do something, we did it with Bob Dylan, a record. Al was the engineer, and I was his assistant, and he stood in the middle of the room with the guys around him. They didn't wear headphones. It was just literally live in the room, and we could edit. So if they sang, if they did 6 or 8 takes, whatever it was, and he went, I sang it better on take 2, I would just lift that verse and cut them together. And we weren't doing it to a click, so it's old school editing. It was in Pro Tools, but it's not on a grid. So you're finding your edit spots and making sure they work. But I had to edit the whole band together.
So if I was to do a edit to a band without a click, then I would know that, the kick drum is a pretty good reference. A lot of times you can edit based on a kick drum. What are some of the things that you look for in an orchestral vocal recording as clues, or is it not that hard? I don't mean that it's not that, it doesn't require expertise, but I mean, like, is it as simple as you just look at it and you feel it out and just kind of
you listen
a little bit? Yeah.
I usually have a chart. Obviously, with an orchestral session, there's a score. So somebody's written this out, and they're playing the same score the whole time. So, I know how to read a score. I can't read it and play it, but I can read the score. So if they say, look, we want to take bars, 28 to 30, 28 to 40 or whatever from the take before, I have to find those downbeats, and then it's like, if you're cutting drums, you usually have a kick drum or a snare drum or whatever that is. If it's orchestral, you find the spot where the diminuendo, where it comes down, you find your spots, wherever that is. You usually, sometimes you can cut in the middle of a string line. They're a little easier. Usually you find a brass hit or something like that. And a lot of times with orchestral stuff, you're stuck with big sections. Like, look, there's no place to cut in this whole phrase. Everybody's playing over everybody else. So we have to, if we want to cut this, we have to take this big section. Like we have to take the whole verse or whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you're doing songs, it's a little easier because songs have a song structure as if, verse, chorus, that kind of stuff. If you're doing movie scores or something like that, that's a little less structured in that way. Sometimes it can be a little more difficult. But
right,
once
and you
get
might also
used
have
to
timing issues, right? Like you can't make it. You can't accidentally make something longer or shorter if it's a cue for a film.
Yeah, you don't want to. Films, 9 times out of 10, a film is going to be on a click. So they're probably on a more strict grid, which makes it a little easier, at least to find your spots. At least the tempos are going to line up. But if we're doing a record and there's no click, we got to make sure that the tempos are good and stuff like that. So it could be that we can't cut in the middle of this verse because they played it a little faster this time than this time. So, but if we take the whole verse, it's not that much faster that it doesn't feel okay, so... But you just get used to that kind of stuff. It's a bit of an art form, I guess. It's certainly easier in Pro Tools than it was on tape. So
right, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
Now, what about things like track count? I mean, are these pretty massive sessions that you have to organize? And do you still sort of work with templates and stuff like that?
Yeah. Definitely. Usually I'll develop a template for each project. The days before the session, I'm going to build my input list so that the studio, send it to the studio, like, here's where I want the microphones, here's where I want the returns. This is how we're going to, we can blend these returns to save faders, stuff like that. But I'm going to build that usually in like Google Doc. I have console layouts in Google Docs with, if I want inserts and preamps and that kind of stuff. And I'll build a Pro Tools template around that lays out the way I want it to lay out, that's labeled. I like to do it myself just so it's labeled the way I want it labeled and stuff, especially if I know I'm mixing it, because I also want it to lay out how I want to see it in the mixing process. I want it to lay into my quote unquote mixing template, which is really just some routing and stuff like that. It's not like I don't have a template like the violins always get this and the vocal always gets this. I don't have that kind of a template, but I have basically what would, in the analog world, what would be an empty console, and you patch your reverbs in, and okay, we're gonna have this stuff come up here and this stuff come up here, that kind of stuff. So I'm building a template beforehand, and it doesn't, on an orchestral session like that, I'm usually building the template for the biggest session we have, so the most amount of musicians. And so if I have 8 woodwinds, I'm building the template with 8 woodwinds. And then, tomorrow we only have 4. Well, you take 4 away. You just make them inactive in the template. But that part of it never changes. Once we get going on a project, it's just rolling through, and everything lines up. And then it makes it easier on the back end. You can import session data. Once you have a mix the first one, I can bring in all my panning and all that kind of stuff, because that's probably not going to change too much throughout the course of an album like that, where everything is kind of quote unquote the same, So it's not like I'm going to pan the violins this way on one song and put them over there on the next song. It's going to be consistent. So
what about, so you mentioned like 16 violins. So when we think about that, for those of us who might be brand new to recording an orchestral setting, how would we think about, what do I mic on an orchestral stage, or what do I mic if I've got 16 strings?
So we're usually miking sections. So if you're in the 9 times out of 10 an orchestral recording is going to set up like you would see an orchestra on stage, right? So the strings will be in the front with the violins kind of to the left, and the violas in the middle, and the cellos kind of to the right of the conductor. Say if you're standing on the podium as the conductor, and the woodwinds are behind them, the brass are over there, and the French horns are over there, how it lays out. So we try to lay it out the same way. And then I'll obviously have like usually a Decca tree over the conductor, which is 3 M50s if I can get them, usually large diaphragm omni directional mics. Depending on the size of the orchestra, they're 10, 12 feet over the conductor. If it's a big orchestra, I might have what we call wide mics, which are just on the outsides to pick up whoever might be in the back. And that's going to be my main thing.
How far apart are the microphones from each other in a Decca tree? They're bigger than the shape of a head, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they're probably 5-6 feet. The left and right are probably 5 or 6 feet wide, and then the center one is out, a few feet in front of it, so it's kind of a triangle.
Do you have any understanding of the logic on a Decca tree and why it works? Because it's intended for stereo speakers, but yet it's 3 mics.
Right, because even though they're omni mics, omni mics, as you get higher in frequency, become more directional. So it's basically picking up. It's a way to pick up 100 people on 3 microphones.
Right.
Those omni mics like an M50, the reach on them is really great. They're not meant to be close up mics. Like if you speak into an M50 really close, it sounds kind of odd.
Right.
They're meant to capture, rooms and far away things. And it's just a really good basic overview of the orchestra. So, you get a little detail because this mic is facing this way and this mic is facing this way. So you do get a stereo feel, even though it's 3 Omni mics for sure. And then we kind of fill in the gaps of the sections. So if I have 16 violins, I probably have 4 microphones over the top of them. I like, again, I got spoiled at Capitol. I like 67s and stuff like that. So large diaphragm. It's not unusual to have, some smaller diaphragm mics on a string section. So maybe MKH40s, KM84s, stuff like that. Depending on what it is and the style of music, a lot of times I'll have those mics in Omni also. Again, I learned from Al Schmidt, so it's not unusual for me to have a lot of mics in Omni in the room.
And I remember we discussed that previously too, where it's this concept of the Omni, having them all in Omni means you can turn one up and it doesn't phase screw up against the other mics, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times in an orchestra setting, you're going to have leakage. There's nothing you can do about it. So you have to use it. It's not like I want to hear only these 2 violins in this mic. No, I just want to capture the section. So everybody kind of works as a group in the orchestra. In the perfect world, the orchestra is balancing themselves anyways. So if the arrangement is good and the conductor is good and the musicians are good, I really don't have to touch anything kind of once I set a level. And again, it's probably 60-70% is those Decca tree mics. And then I'm filling in with close mics for detail, so that when we have that little clarinet line, we hear the clarinet. It doesn't sound like it's across the room. It's a little more focused.
And you can actually bring it up and level at a mix in that moment.
Yeah, if I need to. Absolutely. Yeah, if I need to. Again, in the perfect world, it's going to naturally come out because that's the way it's written. But yeah, if I have to, obviously we're mixing, we're making a record and we want to hear everything. So, if you're doing a classical record, it might be different. Those guys have a different way of doing what they do. But for a more pop record, so to speak, we want to hear that stuff. So we have the ability to bring it up in a mix. If, there's a brass line, sure, you reach over. But if you bring it up, you're bringing up all of them. And it could be that, when I bring up that one cello line, I'm also bringing up the basses that are standing behind him. So, you have to kind of bring that in consideration. But usually the moves are not huge. If it's a little run in a string line or something, you're pushing the fader a couple dB. If you have your basic balance together, and again, if it's written nice and they played it nice, they know. If they know when they have a step out, a solo thing, and they play it a little louder,
Do you ever get on the phone
will ask them,
Do you ever get on the phone to Isotope and you say, hey guys, when are you guys bringing out the orchestral stem separation?
No, I don't want that. But I will. Again, it goes back to reading the chart. I have a chart when we're recording. And if there's a cello line or a bass line or something that I'm not hearing when it goes down, I'll talk to the conductor and say, on the talk back and say, hey, on the next pass, can the basses play out in these 8 bars, or the cello or whatever it is? Can I get more of the clarinet in his little step out line? And they'll say, oh yeah, sure. And they'll just play it louder, which is great.
Is talk back sort of complex on a session like that? Or if you talk, are you talking to everybody all at the same time, but you're referring to the conductor?
It depends. It usually depends on the conductor or the producer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easier to talk to everybody, and just so usually on the big stages like that, you have a choice. This button goes to the conductor only. This button goes to the rhythm section only. This button goes to, just the orchestra. This button goes to everybody. This button goes to the speakers in the room for people who aren't wearing headphones, stuff like that.
It's hard enough to talk to a member of a 5-person band in a studio, let alone 100 people all at once.
Exactly. So usually what'll happen is we'll talk to the conductor alone, and we'll if a take goes down, it's not usually me. Usually it's the producer or whoever. Sometimes the arranger will be in the control room with me and somebody else is conducting. But usually, you do a take, you hear it down, everybody has their little notes, and we'll talk to the conductor and he'll kind of notate everything and then go, okay, here. And then he'll stand on the podium and talk to the musicians and, and they'll go systematically through the score. So like, okay, at the intro, we need more of you guys. And then when we get to this section, we need more of you guys. And when we get here, French horns, you're too loud. Can you bring it down to dynamic? Stuff like that. And then magically it happens. And you look like a genius as an engineer because suddenly it's better and you didn't do anything.
Rock stars, if you want your mixes and masters to translate everywhere, iZotope Ozone 12 gives you the tools to finish with confidence. The new bass control helps you see and balance your low end and punch. Unlimiter brings back life to overcompressed tracks, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, or bass using only the stereo mix file. And when it's time to get loud, Ozone's new IRC Maximizer gives powerful, clean masters without distortion. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Everybody's got pencils out and music stands and taking notes. Yeah, now, you had mentioned David Campbell as doing arrangement, I think. Now, is that, am I remembering this correctly or misremembering? Is that Beck's dad?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, right on.
But he's also one of the most accomplished string arrangers ever.
Yeah.
Everybody, I guarantee you, everybody listening to this podcast has heard something David Campbell did, whether it's a string date on a rock album or pop record or a, more classical thing.
Well, I think I'm gonna blank here for a second, but on XO, on you know who I'm referring to?
Elliott Smith.
Elliott Smith, yeah, thank you. On Elliott Smith's record, I think that's his string arrangements, and I remember that was sort of my introduction through somebody else to who he was as a string arranger.
I believe he did all the arrangements on Figure 8, which is a record I worked on.
Oh, right on. Right on. Very cool, man.
It was a long time. It was like 25 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was David.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to ask you to remember all the details from 25 years ago, Steve.
Yeah. Well, you know how I know? I remember a lot of it. Well, first of all, it was a great record. I loved working with Elliott and with Tom and Rob. It was really fun. But I remember when it was because I had to leave the last week of the record because I was getting married.
Wow.
So that's how I remember I know when I was doing it. It was the summer of 1999. So,
wow. Yeah. There it is. There it is. Dad man stories.
Yeah. That's the only one I can remember.
Wait, do you guys tell dad man jokes in the studio now?
No, we try not to.
Did I just tell one?
There are a lot of dad jokes in the studio these days, though.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so like when you talk about this talkback setup, is that just routing in Pro Tools that makes something like that happen? Or are there special systems and headphone setups that allow you to do all these things?
Absolutely. On an orchestral session like that, and it depends on the studio. Personally, I like it when my headphones are not running through Pro Tools. Usually on sessions like that, we're on big consoles. So everything's coming out of the console, and or like on the big scoring stages, for instance, at Warner Brothers, there's a guy and his job on the stage is like a monitor mixer for a band. His job is just to do the monitors, just to do the headphones for the orchestra. So I don't have to do, so they have it set up where, the Pro Tools rigs hit the main console and they hit his console. I think at Warner Brothers, he's actually using a big Pro Tools system as a console, which is something like I do on the Oscars too. But you have to have a big Pro Tools system. It's a 80 input Pro Tools system.
Yeah.
Because different people want different things. So in an orchestral session, a lot of times, like if it's a movie score, if there's no rhythm section, a lot of times the orchestra's just hearing the click. They're all usually on single-sided headphones. So they're listening to themselves in the room and balancing off what they're hearing in the room. And they're just hearing the click. On a session like the Trisha thing we did where we have a rhythm section, they're probably just hearing bass and drums, just to have a little bit of the tempo and the key, obviously the pitch.
Yeah.
Bass, maybe a little piano, depending on what it is, but they're not hearing themselves for sure. But it could be, but he's also, so the guys on the stages, they have control. So the strings usually have a mix, and the woodwinds usually have a mix, and the brass has a mix, and the rhythm section guys are getting a stereo mix. And if they're in booths or stuff like that, then we have to feed the strings into theirs. But it could be that, the violin and the trumpet have lines that they're playing together, so they might need to hear each other in a certain song. So they'll just speak up, the musicians, like, hey, can I hear a little bit of the trumpet on this one? And he'll be able to dial it in. But the headphone mixes on orchestral sessions it's usually a complex setup, but it's very simple what's going into their headphones.
And so people just have a stereo headphone volume, or do they usually have
mono?
More
it's usually mono. No, it's mono.
Mono.
It's
wow.
just So all the strings are hearing the same thing. They wear single-sided headphones, and they just have a little volume control is all they get. The singer might have a personal mixer where they can have rhythm section, orchestra, more me, that kind of thing, which still I still try to keep it simple. I don't like giving them too much to worry about. It's not that I don't think they can do it. Why should they have to worry about making their own mix? That's my job. I'm the mixer.
Yeah.
So even on a rhythm date, I'm kind of like, I set the headphones up, even if they have personal mixers, I want to mix into it. So I'll tell the assistants, like, put everything at 0, like just line up the faders on their mixer. And during the first take, I'll kind of get a headphone mix, depending on where I am. A lot of times I have really good assistants, so they can do it themselves, obviously. But I basically want them, and it's something I learned from working with Al and working at Capitol, is what the musician's hearing in the headphones shouldn't be that much different when they come in the control room. It should be basically the same. So when Al was engineering and I was mixing headphones, I was constantly listening to what he was doing and trying to make it kind of the same, Now you do some things differently. Obviously, the drummer needs more click, and
they don't need to hear the click in the control room on the playback.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not listening to that. So they're tailored a little bit to what they're hearing out there, but I try to make it not too much different. And, when I started back in the old days, when I started, it was kind of before the personal mixers. And usually you had 2 headphone mixes. If you were doing like a record, it was like, look, this one has a lot of vocal in it, and this one doesn't have hardly any vocal in it. But everything else is kind of the same. And, you'd start the day's session, and everybody would, spend 5 minutes bitching about the headphone. I need more bass. I need less bass. I need and eventually they come to a conclusion, and all right, that's good, go. And then you're just going. And, in a lot of ways, it was a lot easier than it is.
What do you think
now.
they heard on a Frank Sinatra session?
They were probably not listening to headphones at all.
They probably heard him singing out loud in the room.
In the room, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was before headphones. And a lot of times they didn't come into the control room. The control rooms were tiny, so they didn't come in for a playback. They had speakers on the floor. And when they played it back, they just cranked up the speakers in the studio, and everybody sat there and listened to it. And all right, let's do it again. They'd turn those speakers off and go again,
Why do you think the control rooms were so tiny back then? Because that just seemed like that's what you should do.
Well, and they needed the real estate for the studio, because that's where it was all about what was happening in the room. The consoles were tiny. They maybe had, I think when Capitol opened, don't quote me on this, I'm just trying to remember, it was probably 16 inputs. Now, not tracks on a tape machine. I'm talking about inputs. So they probably had up to 16 microphones that they could mix down to either mono or stereo. And when Capitol opened, when the building opened in 1956, it was state of the art. They had 3 tracks. So, it was a 3-track multi-track tape. And then was mixed to mono. They did have a stereo control room, but from what I understand, when the building first opened, the stereo control room and the mono control room got separate feeds. So it was two different recordings going on at the same time.
Wow.
And nobody cared about the stereo. It was all about the mono, because that's what came out.
Wow. It's fascinating, man. What were some of so first of all, 3 tracks, it's always fascinating to me. Do you have any idea why it was 3 tracks instead of 1 track or 2 tracks or 4 tracks or whatever?
Well, I think at that point,
that was the mono and the stereo?
No, it was 3 tracks. So it was the same as a multi-track now. Like it went from 3 track to 4 track to 16 to 8 track to 16 track to 24 track. So it was half-inch tape, and they could get 3 tracks on it. You know, now people always think it's left, center, right. It's not. It's 3 mono. You know, usually, I mean, I've seen a lot of these 3 track. You know, working for Capitol, we used to do a lot of catalog work, and usually it was like the rhythm section on 1 track, the orchestra on the 2nd track, and the vocal on the 3rd track. And then they could quote unquote mix, you know, so you would record it, and then they could go in and they could add reverb to the vocal or to whatever and do it. But the mix happened like right then, you know.
Right.
But then they could also edit and stuff like that. And then in the newer machines, you could actually punch in, but it was clumsy. But if you wanted to replace a vocal, you could, you know.
Yeah.
You could
I wonder if it was just sort of, you know, started out as mono and then became stereo, and then it's like, oh, we can squeeze 1 more track on, and then it was 3. Or if it was the thinking was like you could record stereo and then overdub something.
I think the 3 track came about kind of before stereo. My guess is stereo came out of the 3 track. It was just 3 tracks. Now we have 3 tracks we can work with. You know, I mean, I remember Al telling me when they came out with the 16 track, he was like, "What are we going to do with 16 tracks? Like, we don't need 16 tracks. We were fine with 8." You know.
Yeah.
So, but there was a lot of mixing happening at the time. You know.
Yeah.
And even as Al's career progressed, you know, by the end of his career, you know, we had Pro Tools with unlimited tracks, and he was still recording as if it was an 8 track. You know, he was still writing gain to tape mixing. So, you know, everybody would joke, you could take Al's faders and line them up at 0, and basically the record played back. You know?
That's
I mean,
wild.
he would obviously mix, but his way of working never changed. He was always mixing when he was recording. He was mixing from the beginning. You know.
So how do you
we started mixing when we got the gig. And when we started thinking about what mics we were going to put up and where people were going to go and what studio we were going to use and that kind of stuff. That was the start of the mix, kind of.
How do you see that applying to yourself? So when you look at Al and the way that he worked, and I've seen this with other people, like when you've got a good thing and it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know. It's the consistency, it's the reliability, it's the deliverability in what we do that can often make the difference. How do you see that forming and shaping in your own career path now? Like where you find you stick to tried and true methods despite all the changes and everything around you?
Yes and no. So my way of working is very much like I watched Al do for 20 years, which is obviously that's how I learned. I don't do everything exactly the way he did, and he evolved over time too. Because nowadays we have different requirements. So, you know, we know we're going to have to overdub the vocals if that's what we're going to have to do. So a lot of times I'll ask, especially going into a record, like, are we going to have to replace the vocals? Do we have to isolate, you know, is the guitar not going to stay? Is it just a, you know, placeholder for somebody else to do it later? Sometimes you run into stuff like, you know, hey, we're going to need to make sure that the vocal's separate because we have to make sure we have instrumental mixes with no vocal bleed at all because this is going to be used for a movie or this or whatever. So a lot of times I'll be asking what happens after me. Like so I know that if, you know, we have to have total control over the brass section. So as opposed, you know, between the brass and the strings, we need to have total control so we can take the brass out if we want. Great. Then we have to overdub them, you know?
Right.
So that changes that kind
And that's
of
what
thing.
I was going to ask you earlier when we were talking about vocals too. Like a vocalist might be in a booth. Are there times where you do an orchestral thing and a solo instrument like the violin or something actually needs to be put in the booth so that it can be addressed separately and, you know, even tuned or edited if needed?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. A lot of times in an orchestral setup or a big band setup, we'll just tell them, like, don't play the solo. And then a lot of times it's like we get to take it and go, okay, everybody just stay where you are. Let's just do the solo now. Just sit in your chair where you're sitting in, but now you are going to play, and
right. Then
we
you have
just
the
get
same
those 8
sound
bars
with
of
the same
solo.
mics and everything.
Exactly. And I'll usually record all the mics. So if I'm recording, if it's a big band and I've got, 35 microphones, I'm duplicating all 35 microphones, even though it's only one guy playing. They all coming out the same holes. So it's not like I have extra console I need. But in the mix, at that point, I might be like, all right, I only need these 4. That's fine. I don't need all the drum mics because the drums are way back there or whatever. But usually we're recording everything. And we call it stripe, especially in film music. It happens a lot where they call striping because they want to have complete control. So even though you have a whole orchestra sitting there, they might play it all together and say, all right, now we got it. We know our dynamics and all that kind of stuff. Now let's just do the strings. And they'll do a pass of just the strings. And the brass and the woodwinds will just sit there, and then they're like, okay, great, we got the strings. Now let's do a pass of just the woodwinds. And then everybody else sits there and just the woodwinds play. And then, it takes a minute or two, however long your cue is.
And have you trained your ear at this point? But
suddenly you have 150. If you have 50 mics, suddenly you have 150 tracks in your Pro Tools session.
Right, exactly.
Right? And that's how when people say, oh, I had 500 tracks on this film. Well, that's how it's happening because everything's being stacked. When you get down to it, they're probably coming out of 40 faders. So.
Yeah, the studio version of that for me is typically when the drummer wants to play something again and they're still sitting at the drum kit. And then it's like, all right, well, I'll just fire up a bunch of the mics and we overdub.
To do the at the end.
Right, exactly.
The cymbal overdub. But you want it to sound the same, so you have to record all those mics.
Yeah, in the same space. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool.
Then it becomes file management at that point, which is why on big film dates, we usually have a recordist or a Pro Tools operator, a person whose job is just to run the Pro Tools session and just to organize all that stuff and keep everything labeled correctly. And, that's a full-time job on a movie. And there's guys that get paid a decent amount of money to do it, and they're invaluable to it. If I'm on a big session, I'll make sure I have, if I can't run Pro Tools myself, I make sure I have a really good Pro Tools person sitting next to me. It could be the assistant at the studio, depending on where I am, or sometimes it's somebody I have to bring in. I know a lot of good Pro Tools guys, so
right,
guys, girls, whoever it is, obviously.
Still call Andrew Sheps and say, hey, Andrew, you still got that Pro Tools rig? You can come on over.
Come on over, yeah.
Oh. Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, the second half of the show. My guest today is Steve Genewick, joining us from his studio, Mixing Atmos in Los Angeles. Steve, are you ready to jam?
Ready to jam. Let's do it.
Ready to jam, dude. So, I asked you before we rolled, but I didn't ask you again on the show. What is the cool mic that you're using for your voice on this?
Well, this is one of my Beyerdynamic M500 microphones. So it kind of looks like a 58, but it's actually a ribbon mic.
It sounds great. It's very great mids to it, and a clarity.
Yeah, it's great. I love them. Somebody turned me onto these many, many years ago, and I had one, and I use it a lot on electric guitars, actually, because it's a ribbon, so it does that ribbony thing. And then I started using it when we would do like live performance things at Capitol. I started using it as a vocal mic because it sounds really good, and it's hypercardioid, so it rejects. And I found out like through the 70s and 80s, they were popular like live if you see big concerts and stuff. And I had one or two of them, and then before I was going to do this Spinal Tap project, I got hired to do Spinal Tap, and I knew we were going to do live vocals, and I was like, I need more. So I bought a few more. So then I had to label them because the guys. So I'm actually talking on David St. Hubbins right now. But I have one that's labeled Nigel and one that's labeled Derek. So, I did that because I wanted to make sure they got the same mic back. But then I was like, I'm leaving these. This is fun.
Absolutely, man. That's a forever marking right there.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a great mic though. I love them. Yeah.
So what was it like? So recording all three of those guys on their vocals. I mean, describe what that was like. How are they similar and how are they different?
Well, it was really fun. They're really great musicians and they play everything. Obviously, we had a drummer who, the movie's way out now. So in the movie, her name is Dee Dee, but in real life, her name is Val. So Val was a drummer, and CJ Vanston is their music director and keyboard player and producer. So the tracks were cut live. It's the three guys and CJ and Val, and they play everything. That's, unless there's a special guest, but and they sing everything. So when we were doing Spinal Tap, they did the movie, and the movie was done in New Orleans, and everything was recorded on the set live. So all the music in the movie is live. So it's them playing. So the first thing when I got hired, I'd known CJ Vanston for many years, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to do this? We're going to, I knew they were doing a movie because we had played golf. And so I knew they were doing the movie, and he said, look, we're going to do an album with Spinal Tap. Would you be the engineer? I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. It'd be fun.
That's awesome.
So he said, great. So we're going to start in September or whatever it was. I think it was September last year, which was a few weeks away. It was like a month away or so. So great, had studio. We were going to work at the Village because they like the Village. They've worked there before. I was like, great, I love the Village. We'll do that. And then a couple weeks later, he called me back and he said, hey, we got to go in a week early because we need to mix the music for the film. So the songs that are in the movie. If most people have probably seen the movie by now, but there's some rehearsal things, and there's the back, like the last 15 minutes of the movie is basically a concert clips. So he said, so we have to, and that was all live. It was all recorded live. So he said we have to mix that. The first thing we did was we went to the Village and we mixed all the music elements of the film, which was fun. So that was kind of my trial by fire with Spinal Tap. And then after we did that, then we went and started the album. And the album is some old songs, some new songs, mostly new songs, but some reimagining of some of the old songs. And it's them. I set them up. They're a rock band. So it was, we were in Studio D at the Village, which is a pretty decent sized room, and put the drums in the middle of the room and set everybody up in a kind of a semicircle around them. I had amps in ISO booths and stuff like that, but just the amps. And they said, no, CJ said, no, they're going to sing live. Like, we might overdub, but they should all sing live. So that's where I thought about the M500s, and I was like, all right, I need more M500s. So I went on eBay and bought some more. So they all had these in front of them for their talkback mics, but when we did a take, this is what they sang into.
And that's usually the vocal that you could use in the end too?
I could use it, depending on what it was. A lot of times we went back and re-sang stuff just because we could. But there's definitely songs where these are the mics. And sometimes sometimes we did it over again, but it was like, just do another one. Don't even bother to get up. Just do it right there. And we just roll back, hit record, and just overdub the vocal right away.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture. Yeah, it's a mixture of these M500s or if we did like an overdub later, it was probably a 47. A more traditional setup. I had a setup off to the side that was a vocal booth. So if it was just let's sing this one again at a later date, maybe. A lot of times we would do kind of a song a day. So we had everybody set up, tracking. Everything was set up and ready to go. It was always the five of them tracking together with somebody singing the vocal. And we would kind of come in during the day. Everything was demoed. So because the guys write everything, they all have little writing studios, which is a very basic Logic studio for them. So whatever combination of people wrote the song, we would have a demo of that song. Them playing keyboard, basic drum, tic-tac, stuff like that. So we had a song structure and all that was all kind of worked out for the most part. Sometimes it would change, just like any record. So we would have, and it was, what song you want to do today? And somebody would go, let's do, whatever, Rockin' in the Urn. Great. And that was, we'd listen to the demo and everybody, okay, yeah, I remember this one. And then they'd go out and, we'd record for an hour or two till we got what we thought was a good take. And then we'd immediately do the overdubs. All right, well, we got to double the guitar. So it was just, let's do the whole thing right now. And then it was, all right, well, let's sing it. And whether they sat in their chair and sang it so we kind of did a song a day, top to bottom. So by the end of the day, we were kind of done with a song. Obviously not mixed, but it probably 90% finished with the song by the end of the day. And, these days, we're starting at 11-ish. Mm-hmm. We're done by 6-ish, 7-ish, maybe.
Wow, that's pretty wild, man. It's cool. It's cool to know those guys have got that kind of work ethic, One of the things that really struck me about the movie was not only did it live up to the first film, but it may have even beat it on a certain level because it was so well done. And I thought about it and I was like, because it was just great. It was really, really funny. It was so I was like, oh, hell yeah. It was my birthday present. I just went with friends. Oh, wow. I was like, cool. Come on, everybody. We're going to the movies. We're going to see Spinal Tap. And it occurred to me, I was like, well, yeah, these guys, they did the film. It was in the 80s. And then they've been working professionally in, I don't know. I'm not aware of the level of music they've kept up with, but as far as the acting and the comedy and the filmmaking, they've continued that. So their level of expertise is way up there now. So I just thought that was great, Yeah,
and they've done, they did the movie A Mighty Wind, which was them as the folk group. These guys can play. They're real players. There's no.
So that's all Nigel's guitar parts. He's playing
all them. Yeah, it's all them.
Man.
Yeah, it's all them. Harry's a fantastic bass player.
Yeah.
There's no bullshit with these guys. They're the real deal. Like I said, unless it was a guest coming in for a reason. Mm-hmm. Elton John, Paul McCartney. The people that are on the record. But other than that, no, it's all them. CJ played the keyboard parts, obviously. Val played the drum parts, and then there's one song where Greta, who was our PA, our production assistant, she was a great singer and we needed this. So she went out and sang a background part for us. And, at one point I ran out and did a shaker because this needs a shaker. And I was like, nobody's around. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And I just ran out and did the shaker part, stuff like that.
What about some hand claps?
Always hand claps. Yeah, I got hand claps in. Absolutely. Hand claps for all of us around, and we put everybody out. So the guys, the whole band, Nick, my assistant, sent Greta out. And then I hit record and ran out to the room and we all did hand claps. And then I ran back in.
Old school, dude. Old school. Don't trip over the mic cable.
Exactly. So I didn't even put headphones on. I just watched everybody else clap my hands. So, but that was kind of the routine is we do basically a song a day. And then, by the end of the day, you kind of worked. And we would work, it was start here and here. So it wasn't like we were taking huge breaks and stuff like that. So we were working. And we did that for 4 or 5 weeks. And, with all the overdubs and stuff. And then we went up to Studio F at the Village, which is an S6 room, all digital room. And we mixed up there. So I brought stuff back home and kind of got the mixes prepped here. And then I would go into Villa. I would show up earlier. I would go in at 10 and I would kind of basically mix the song to where I got it to a point. And then CJ, the producer, would come in and he'd do his rides if he wanted to do or change, the usual mixing stuff. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, for mixing, the guys weren't in every single day because we were mixing in the box. They didn't have to be there every day. there were days where just CJ and I would be there. And then they would come in and we could play them 2 or 3 songs at a time because we were all in the box. So it was like, pull this one up, do whatever changes they wanted. Great. Pull the next one up, do whatever changes. Great. Move on to the next. So, and that took a couple weeks. And then it was interesting because, at the same time, they were still finishing the movie, the post-production, doing that stuff. So, and they also, when we were doing the record, they didn't have all the business side of the movie finalized, like the distributors and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't know when it was going to come out. So we knew the record was going to come out when the movie came out, but we didn't know when it was kind of like, it'll probably be in the summer or the fall, but we're not quite sure. So we actually finished the record and made the decision not to master it because I thought, well, if this is going to be 6 months before this comes out, like this could all change.
Right.
You give a band 6 months with a record, something's going to change.
Right.
And so we thought, well, why waste time and money mastering this? Let's just wait till we know when it's going to come out. And if they want to change something, for all we knew, they could have, a month later, we wrote 6 new songs and we're back in again. So it actually didn't happen. They were kind of happy with what they did. So we actually didn't master it till like 6 months after we finished the record.
And what did you do for mastering on that?
We went to Lursen Mastering. Gavin Lursen mastered it for us. And he mastered it for digital and for vinyl. So, because we knew there was going to be a vinyl release. So he did all the mastering and he did a great job. And we told him, like, a lot of times and Gavin called me and he's like, I know, so Gavin and I have known each other for years because Gavin used to work for Doug Sachs at the mastering lab. So when he was Doug's assistant, I was Al's assistant. So we kind of came up together. And he said, I know on your records, usually I don't like mastering guys to tweak it too much. I kind of want, it's just the way and he was like, is this one the same? I said, no, this is a rock and roll record. Like, this is Spinal Tap. Like, do what you got to do. If you got to hit this with a limiter, hit it. If you see something, if you want to EQ something, go for it. Like, so I kind of gave him carte blanche to do what he does, which he's very good at. So he did a great job. And I don't know that, he definitely compressed it a little bit more than I have, but I left him that room in the mixing because I knew I wanted him to be able to put this record together.
Yeah.
Because it's an album of a lot of different kind of songs too. This isn't like the Trisha Yearwood Christmas record we were just talking about, where it's one orchestra through the whole thing and the whole record is very similar. This was a rock and roll record. So every song was a little different. So it needed that mastering to kind of put the whole package together and make sure this song wasn't louder than this song and make sure the bottom end was right, and there's some ballady stuff on it and there's some pretty kick and rock stuff on it, so it needed that final step of somebody else. And I like having a proper mastering engineer do that. These guys are my friends and I trust them, and I'm like, hey, put your ear on this, make sure we didn't screw anything up. So make it sound like a record now. So, and they did a great job. So
that's great. Hey, rock stars, writing and recording your next great song just got a whole lot easier with Complete 15 from Native Instruments. This powerful toolkit gives you everything from deep sound design to instant musical ideas. Contact 8 introduces creative features like the new chords tool, letting you generate and customize compelling chord progressions without needing to know music theory, making it perfect for songwriting. And the phrases tool helps you find fresh melodic lines on the spot. With over 165 instruments and more than 150,000 sounds, Massive X, battery, and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, you've got everything you need to create in any genre. You can shape your ideas into real music fast. Whether you're sketching an idea or finishing a full production, Complete 15 keeps you in the creative flow from first note to final mix. Add your Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware to the mix for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. And so that's Nigel's poem, Let's Just Rock Again, Flower People, exactly. Bright and Rock, all of that. Yeah. And it's great to see them on the cover of the album too. Now, did you guys have a moment where the vinyl shows up in a box and you pull it out and it's all black?
No, actually, I haven't seen a version of it yet. To be honest with you, I have the test pressings that we did. I don't even have a copy of the record, to be honest with you. I got to get one now that I think about it. I'm going to see them.
I'm embarrassed
to see them next week.
I got a record player.
See it. I had to, it's funny. I had to get for this particular album. Oh no, for Trisha's album, we did vinyl also. And I got the test because I always get the test pressing so I can listen to and my turntable broke. Like that day, like I turned it on, I was like, suddenly my turntable's running at the wrong speed. I was like, this is really weird. Like, why does this sound so funny? And I put on another record and I was like, oh, whoa, this one sounds bad. And I had to like desperately go out that day and buy a new turntable.
What'd you end up choosing for a turntable? Anything you discovered when you were doing that?
Yeah, I got an Audio Technica, and I don't know what the model number is. It looks like the old Technics 1200s that I used to DJ with.
Yeah.
It looks almost exactly like that. So I don't know what the number. It's like a $400 turntable. I mean, it's nice. It works great. I do that all the time. I'm looking at a box of test pressings down there. So a lot of the albums I do go to vinyl, and I like to listen to it before it goes to manufacturing just to make sure everything's cool. Make sure there's no
distortion. And then you just have that hit your Atmos speakers, your left and your right for playback?
The stereo speakers, yeah. In my system, I can switch through the DADMAN software, so I have a stereo setup. I have stereo, I have 7.1, I have Atmos, I have the turntable. I can flip through whatever I'm monitoring, and it comes out the appropriate speakers. So
right, and you said
if I'm just mixing in stereo, I only turn 2 speakers on. I don't turn everything on all the time. So
right. And you said you have a 714 system there, I think, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And
but
so
again, if I'm listening in stereo, 9 would be wides between the sides and the fronts, but I don't have those in this room. Now,
so it's like a wide
Atmos,
left and a wide right.
Exactly. Now, this gets into the whole Atmos template bed, which has been spoken ad nauseum on a lot of podcasts. But when I mix Atmos, I mix in a 916 template. Like my object bed is a 916, but in my room, it comes out of a 714 speaker system. Unless I'm doing stereo, and then it comes out 2.
Right,
so
exactly.
Actually, 3. Technically 3, because the way we set my room up, I'm actually using my sub as a little bass extension for stereo also.
Okay.
But if I turn it off, it's not. I mean, these are pretty decent sized PMCs behind me, so they have enough low end, but we set it up just to add another octave or so on the bottom end. So they actually sound like really big speakers in here. So, well, you heard them.
So
they
now
sound pretty big.
the one in a speaker array is typically the low, the sub. But I know sometimes people will set up, like I have 2 subs in my setup for stereo in my studio, and I know somebody else who mixes in Atmos and actually has 4 subs around the room. Is that common to have more than 1 sub in some setups? And does that get referred to as a 0.4 or just always a 0.1?
It's still a 0.1 because it's still just one send in your. It's one channel of your mix. Typically it's called the LFE channel. The low frequency and from and effects. Basically, it's it's a movie. It comes from movies. It's to get the rumble of the explosion and all that kind of stuff. Depending on the size of your room, if I had a bigger room, I might have more subwoofers. Like at Capitol, we had a very big room, and there were actually 4 subwoofers in there, but it was one send. I mean, when you send something to the sub, it sent them to all 4. We were just using it because we needed we needed volume because it was a big room. My room here is not that big, so I can do it with 1 subwoofer. I was actually considering getting a second one that would be, and I was going to split them. I was considering, so I was going to use one as like the bass extension for the main speakers, and the other one as my quote unquote LFE channel. But I decided against that just because of the way it was set up with me and Brian from Dolby. We were like, this is working great. Let's just leave it this way. But when I listen in stereo, I actually do turn my subwoofer on. Yeah, so. But it just makes my speakers bigger. It's not a separate send to the LFE in stereo. It's just stereo.
Does the frequency response or the tuning of an LFE in a system like that, is it different than the tuning of a sub and just a stereo and a sub system, or is it essentially the same way that it would be set up?
In my system, it's essentially the same. Yeah, it's again, we're talking about what we call the B chain, which is your monitor environment. So, which is separate from like the 0.1 in your Pro Tools session. I mean, that goes to that subwoofer, but when you set up a speaker system, you're setting up that system agnostic of what is going into it,
Right,
so
right, exactly.
If I'm just playing my turntable, it's still coming through that playback system.
Yeah,
I know it's kind of confusing, but it kind of makes sense, I guess.
No, but it helps. It helps. It's just good to ask these basic questions sometimes to just kind of rethink it,
right?
Or realize that it's it's either different than what you thought it was, or it's just not different than what you thought it was.
And if I'm mixing in Atmos or I'm mixing in 7.1 or 5.1, I always have a separate send for my LFE information. So, like if I'm sending the bass guitar, it's for sure going to my left and right speakers. I'm probably then sending a little bit into the center speaker just to kind of anchor it in the center, and then I'm deciding how much is going to that LFE channel. So I'm dialing a little bit of it into the LFE channel, and in my mixes, it's kind of just a little support, a little extension of the bottom end. So if you were to turn off the subwoofer, you'd still hear bass, obviously. You'd still quite a bit of bass. Most, I'd say probably 90% of the instrument is coming out of my main left and right speakers. I'm just using the LFE as an extension, to get the extra octave on the kick drum or the bass or what. It's usually just bass and kick drums and low frequency stuff that's going down there. Everything else, like I don't put vocals in it, stuff like that. That doesn't need to be down there. And mine filters at like 150.
Like, you're doing hip hop mixes and stuff like that, where there's like that would be considered bass, and that would go in there too.
Yeah, I might
like
put more. And if I'm doing something that's bass heavy, like some of the pop records, they have a lot of low end information, so I might put more of that kind of stuff. If there's a low synth or something like that, I might put some of that in there. Yeah.
But to your point earlier, LFE, E standing for effects in a film.
Right.
There is information in films that is so low that it's not going to show up in other places. I remember going to see, I probably mentioned this once or twice on the show in 10 years of doing this show, but going to see Jurassic Park, and I went, one of the versions, maybe it was the first one or a second one or something, but I saw it in a drive-in movie theater. And so we're on the little speakers, and like the speaker that they're playing over outside or whatever in the playground area. And they showed this shot.
Now you're gonna have to describe what a drive-in movie theater is.
Right, exactly. So drive-in movie theater rock stars is where you literally drive in and the movie's projected up. I mean, probably everybody knows what it is at this point because it shows up in a movie too, as a reference. But so it's little speakers around, or you might listen in your car or something like that. So they had this shot, and it was a point at which there was no other sound going on, and they just showed a picture of a puddle of water, and then the puddle starts rippling, and there's no sound. And I was like, well, what the hell's going on there? And I realized, I was like, oh shit, that's the big ass dinosaur that's coming. And if you were in a movie theater, you'd hear the LFE sub going right now. So it would be like that rumble is making the puddle rumble, the ripples on the water. But it was really comical to see it in a drive-in where you just saw this, like, it was like dead air in the film, it felt like.
Right. Yeah, I think if you're listening to one of my mixes on your phone, you're probably not going to hear the LFE channel.
Right, exactly.
It's just not going to be there. Yeah.
So back to Spinal Tap for just a sec. There's a second, so there's that, the end continues, and then there's Break Like the Wind 2025 remaster is also in the playlist. And that, so what was your interaction on that one too? And that record goes back to, how far back does that go? Like, what is that one?
I believe that's their second record. Okay. the band Spinal Tap has put out like 5 or 6 albums. I'm not even sure how many they've done.
Okay, all right.
So I believe that was the second record. And so that's, again, a record they did, I believe, in the early 90s. And I got hired by the record company to remix the record in Dolby Atmos. So we did an Atmos mix of the new record. So after the mastering and all that we already talked about, I did do an Atmos mix of The End Continues that I did here. And then played it for the guys. But then the record company, which was Universal, which was the company I used to work for, so they knew I was doing the catalog guys knew I was doing Spinal Tap because I talked to them still, and I know that, and they were like, "You should do Break Like the Wind, remix that." So Universal hired me to remix Break Like the Wind in Dolby Atmos, which was fun because that was done on tape. I didn't have stems. There were no stems. So they had to transfer the original analog tapes, which was a bit of a thing. So that was a full remix. I had to go back and, re-engineer the whole thing. So I just got files of multi-tracks.
Wow.
And there were like 4 different producers on that record. So they weren't consistent. So that one took a minute, but it was kind of fun. Because there's a lot of the same people. And on the original record, it was a lot of my friends were the guys making it. So there was one tape that I saw, and I had a problem with one of the tapes. And I was like, who did? And when I get the files from Universal, I would get screenshots of the track sheets and the tape box labels and all that kind of stuff. So I had the track sheets and all that stuff. And there was a question I had, and I was like, who did this? And I went back and looked at it. My friend Nico Bolas was the engineer on the original record. And Mike Prasante, who does a lot of the records with T-Bone Burnett, was the assistant engineer at Sunset Sound back then in the 90s. So I literally called those. I was texting them. I'm like, do you guys remember this? And of course they didn't because it was 40 years ago or whatever. But it was kind of fun to see those names show up on, on musicians that I know and stuff like that. Oh, Steve Lukather did this one. Oh, that's fun.
And that was all done out in LA as well?
Yeah, different studios. A lot at Sunset Sound, Record One, Ocean Way. I don't know. Subsequently, I've gotten more information talking to the Spinal Tap guys about it after the fact. So obviously, I'm still working with Spinal Tap, so in various forms. So we're not quite done with Spinal Tap yet. But so
the end continues.
So that was it's continuing as it continues. Yeah. So after Spinal Tap? So Harry Shearer, who's Derek Small's in Spinal Tap, the bass player, he's put out solo records as Derek Smalls. I know there's at least one, if not 2. So a few months after Spinal Tap, I got a call from Harry saying, "Hey, I want to go in and record a couple songs. I got these songs I want to do." So we went in with studio musicians. CJ Vanson was the producer again, but we had studio musicians for that with Derek Smalls. And he just kind of kept writing. So especially if you're online now, you'll start seeing, I think the first one came out a week ago or so. If you follow Derek Smalls online, you'll see these songs are coming out kind of systematically as Derek Small's solo project. And they're legit. It's studio musicians with, it's all him playing, all him singing. And
is he playing bass? Is he playing other instruments
absolutely.
as well?
No, he just plays bass and sings and writes all the songs. Yeah. And that stuff I mixed here at my place. We did remote mixing for that because Harry lives in New Orleans most of the time. So,
okay.
So that was fun.
Hey, rock stars, when it's time to finish your music, iZotope Ozone 12 gives you the powerful new tools to master with confidence. The new bass control helps you balance your low-end EQ, sustain, and punch so that your tracks translate everywhere. Unlimiter restores clarity and impact to overcompressed mixes, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, and bass using only the stereo mix file. When it's time to push loudness, Ozone's new IRC5 Maximizer delivers clean and powerful competitive masters that stay open and musical. And with an updated mastering assistant that guides, not decides, you can move faster, make better decisions, and stay fully in control from start to finish. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off.
Maybe by the time this comes out, they just announced it, so I'm not blowing anything. But the guys did a live concert. I won't blow the whole thing. So last week and actually next week, I was working with them on like touching up the concert film. So I don't think I'm going to be mixing that, but you know, we had to fix guitar parts and fix some vocals and stuff like that. You know, the stuff you do on a live record. So it was minimal stuff. But so I was with the guys last week doing that. I'll see the guys next week again. So again, yes, Spinal Tap continues. So, and they're really fun and they're great guys. So I love doing it. You know, it's really a lot of fun. And to answer the question, no, they're not in character when we're recording. Like they're not in the wigs and stuff like that. Obviously, they're in character when they're doing their parts.
Right.
But
the voice
when they
comes
come
out.
in the room, when they come in the room, it's Chris and Mike and Harry. So, yeah. But there were a couple times where like I remember Michael coming in one day and he was like, you know, I was listening, we got to re-sing whatever song it was, you know. He said, it doesn't sound like David. It sounds like me. It sounds like Michael McKean, not David stayed up. And we're like, okay. And we kind of listened. We're like, yeah, I guess you're kind of right. I mean, that's a subtle thing. And, you know, I couldn't explain to you what the difference was. But when he said it, we all kind of went, huh, yeah, okay. I think it happened to Chris too, where, you know, he was like, yeah, I want to redo that guitar. It's not Nigel enough. And we all kind of went, oh, yeah, because you kind of know what that means. You know, that's the thing. You know, it's sometimes, you know, it's that. Can we make it more blue? It's like, well, this had to be more Nigel, and it was like, okay, it wasn't Nigel enough. Let's take.
And that's not even the vocal. That's the guitar part.
Yeah, well, that's Nigel's signature thing is his guitar solos.
No doubt. That's hilarious. Wow, it's great to think about having, on an instrument, having a character that you become.
Yeah. But a lot of
I'm going to start doing that.
You know, yeah. I mean, you know. You always want I was literally doing a record this week with I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I won't tell you who the artist is. But at one point, it was like, you know, the producer, I was not the producer, I was just the engineer, but the producer looked at him, you know, they were talking about a take, and he just went, you know, it doesn't sound like you. You sound like you're doing, you know, you sound like this other you know, it's not, it just, whatever it was. I don't want to get too specific, but it wasn't you. And everybody kind of went, yeah, you're right. Didn't really sound like him. So he went out and did it again, and it was great. You know, so it happens, but it happens more when you have these characters, obviously.
Right. Totally. So, when they're so obvious.
Yeah.
Now, so on the new film, there's plenty of things that refer back to the original and stuff like that. So there's a version of Stonehenge in the new film toward the end. Mm-hmm. Now, is that all stuff you got to mix as well?
Yes, and record.
So
in the movie, again, the movie's been out, so I'm not blowing it. In the movie, it's Elton John singing with them. So the movie is the live version that they cut on the stage, like when they shot it. That's all live. For the record version, we redid it for the record version. They had recut Stonehenge for something like 10 years ago. Like with Greg Bissonette was in the band for a long time. So it was the guys and Greg Bissonette and CJ. Ed Cherney had recorded that, and they had done it at the Village. So for the Stonehenge that's on the record, because for various reasons, one of them being we kind of wanted to honor Ed and Greg. And so we actually used the drums, maybe just the drums, maybe some of the background parts from that recording from 10 years ago. And then we overdubbed the new stuff onto that, the Elton vocal and the new Nigel and that kind of stuff. So so the Stonehenge, there's the original Stonehenge, then there's the one they did like 10 years ago for whatever that was. I don't even know what it was for. Then there's the Stonehenge that's in the movie. That's a separate recording. And then there's the Stonehenge on this new record, which is a whole new separate recording. And then there's another one that's coming. So
that's a lot of Stonehenges.
It's a lot of. I've mixed Stonehenge quite a bit in the last year. Yes. So the new thing that's coming is a concert that they shot. So it'll be a live concert of them performing with some special guests. I won't tell. But then there's also Spinal Tap moments stitched into it. And
That's
then
so great, man.
And then
Are you so? How
I started
much
calling it Spinal Tap 3. I don't know if anybody else is, but I think it's Spinal Tap 3. It's pretty funny.
Now, how granular do you feel like you've personally gotten into all the little memes and jokes of all the films now at this point? Did you go back and sort of rewatch the first one as part of this process?
Like everybody, I've seen the film a bunch of times, but I hadn't, and everybody references, every session, somebody references Spinal Tap. Something goes to 11, something, is in Dubly or whatever it is. So, and it's more funny when that comes up in a Spinal Tap session, by the way. But, because it does. As a side note, we had Marshall amps that we were using on the record. The two we had all went to 11.
Hell yeah. Did Marshall actually make those for you? Did you guys have to customize them?
No, that's Marshall brilliant. Made them. They have, the Spinal Tap guys have custom Marshalls that all go to 11. And I'm dying to get it. I was like, I want one of those. I still want one. Just to have. But yeah, so when I got the gig, my wife and I were like, we got to watch the movie again. I haven't seen this movie straight through in forever. And I was like, I went online, and it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't streaming anywhere for different reasons. I mean, I've subsequently there's been lawsuits and companies changed over 40 about who owns it, but it wasn't streaming at the time. And I was like, I got the DVD somewhere. Somewhere I have a DVD of Spinal Tap. I know I have one, but it was probably buried in a box in the garage somewhere. So I just went online to like eBay and found one. I think it's back there now. And then so the DVD showed up a couple days later, and then I couldn't find a DVD player.
Oh man, yeah, I think I sold mine at the yard sale eventually.
Yeah, I my guess is I probably had one that broke, or one of my kids took it, or whatever. So I literally had to go buy a DVD player. I went to Best Buy. So finally, after like a week, my wife and I sat down and watched the movie again. I watched it straight through just to have the context of the characters and all that kind of stuff. And when we went to the studio, to the Village to start, you remember we mixed the film first. So it was just the film. And CJ and I mixed for a week before the guys ever showed up. Because we had all this work to do. And I started asking like the assistant engineers and the runners at the studio, I'm like, have you seen Spinal Tap? And like, have you seen, because it got to be a kind of a running joke, because, these are young kids. They're in their early 20s or what. And probably half of them hadn't seen the movie, and didn't really know. It's funny. They knew the references, but they didn't really know what it was from. Yeah. So I told Tina,
it's like a schoolyard song or joke that sticks around. Exactly. And nobody ever knows where it comes from.
Yeah, so I told Tina, the studio manager, she was like, "What? That's ridiculous." So she had movie night at the studio, and all the runners and assistant engineers had to watch Spinal Tap.
That's awesome, man.
Because we were coming. I mean, we were coming in for like a month or two. It was like, you better know what's going on here, otherwise this is going to look really silly, When you hear these old men singing these songs, it's going to be weird. But if you know it's Spinal Tap, then it's great.
Yeah. Well, so when I was, so in the 80s, I was a kid going through my teen years, and my family ran a movie theater. And we showed that film for the first time in our theater. So that's where I saw it. My stepdad was like, yeah, it's this movie about, a rock band. Yeah. And I was like, watching, I was like, and it just stuck, It's great.
Yeah. And I think it was the first movie for a lot of them. I mean, they had been working. They had been working. They were all working. Harry was a child actor, so they were all working and had done stuff. But I think it was Rob Reiner's first movie he directed. Yeah, and Rob Reiner was obviously involved in this, so he was around while we were making the record and the movie also, which was really fun because I've been a huge fan of his for years. So
now, was Rob producing or directing the new film too, or was that a younger, like a new director, and Rob was overseeing it?
No, it was all Rob.
Yeah, okay,
absolutely. Marty DeBerge.
That's so great. I mean, I remember it all so well. I mean, he's like wearing the the khaki safari vest, and he's got the lens, slung around his neck, the viewfinder. It's so great.
And his hat. Yeah.
So classic. Billy Crystal in it doing the, Mime is Money memes.
Exactly. We had a screening early on. They had a really early screening for like friends and family kind of screening.
Yeah.
That we got to go to. And I sat next to Billy Crystal. It was kind of fun. He was just there he just wanted to see the movie. Yeah. Yeah. But those guys were there. It was pretty fun.
Did you get a sense from all those guys and like Paul Schaefer, doing like it's all my fault, just kick this ass, But did you get a sense from any of the guys, the level of how much of it all was scripted versus sort of improvised through the filmmaking process too?
It's all improvised. The way they make those movies, they have an outline, obviously, of the storyline of what the story is, but all the scene, there's no scripts for anything. It's all improvised, 100%.
Amazing.
And I've spent a lot of time with Christopher Guest over the last year, and all his movies are that way. So there's not a script. There's an outline of what it's going to be. So it's in this scene, this is what's happening. And then, and like if you have the original Spinal Tap, if you have the DVD, there's like 2 hours of outtakes and stuff. It's a lot. There's a whole nother movie basically.
Oh,
of
really?
Outtakes.
Wow. Yeah. I think I must have that because I do have a copy of the original, and I think it's got some outtakes at the end. So I got to get a copy of the new one too.
Yeah. And I know there's a book that they were doing too, a book that's out now about Spinal Tap. I've seen like mock-ups of it. I haven't actually seen the book yet, but
it's great. I just love that that one idea and that one starting thing became an entire lifelong career of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Chris is David St. Hubbins, or am I mixing?
No, Chris is Nigel.
Chris Nigel.
Guest
okay, great.
Chris Guest is Nigel. Michael McKean is David, and Harry Shearer is Derek, and Rob Reiner is Marty DeBerge.
Michael from Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Right. Yeah, so good.
Really early on, the first time I saw Michael was Laverne and Shirley. Lenny and Squiggy.
No shit. He was Squiggy and
he was Laverne and Shirley. Was he Lenny? I think he was Lenny.
Lenny. Okay. Yeah. Lenny. Okay, yeah. That's so wild.
And Harry is, Harry's half the voices on The Simpsons.
Right.
He still does The Simpsons.
That's just wild, man. I love the way it's all connected.
Yeah. Chris made, all those Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman and all those movies, which are fantastic movies.
Yep.
And really, these guys are genuinely funny guys. The control room banter was off the charts funny.
It's hard to stay focused.
Yeah. There were times where, you can lose 45 minutes real quick just watching these guys go back and forth. Yeah, it was pretty funny. So
to that point,
but they're also a real band. So you have like band dynamics like you would have in any other band because they've been a band for 40 years. They've toured, they've played big shows that, they've played Glastonbury and they've played Royal Albert Hall and they've so they're a legit band, even though they have these other careers, so you still have all the band shit that happens with a band.
But the band was formed. Do you know if the band was formed and then the idea of making a movie was put together, or was the band formed for the film
to make the movie? Yeah. And you can go. There's a story. It's funny because I heard Chris tell the story in person for the first time like a week ago. But there is a story about Chris overhearing a conversation between these band guys like back in the 70s, and like kind of the whole thing is based on that. So that's and they amazing. Did like there is a backstory if you go and look, if you look up Spinal Tap and hear old interviews and stuff, there is a backstory about how it came up and how they did it. It's funny because again, when I got the gig, I kind of did a little bit of a deep dive into the more of the backstory just so I knew what was going on. So I caught that, and then I hung out with these guys for off and on for the better part of the last year. So we've become friends. So I've talked to them and gotten to ask questions and stuff like that. So or other people would come in and they'd be like, "Hey, what happened?" So you're just there when the conversations happen, which is fun.
Yeah, you learn a ton.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then those guys going into the studio for a month, just the idea of having a month to make a record and then the extra 2 weeks for it. I mean,
Insane.
did they still have that thrill of I know for me, going in and working on a record for a length of time, especially if you're part of the band and all that too, and you really feel like you're on the creative end of it, it can be, I mean, it's a challenge at times, but it's a real thrill to be in that process. Did you get that sense that they just still get that excitement throughout the whole process?
Definitely. Yeah. It's definitely fun. It's all, it was, yes. And I mean, I can't remember the last time I locked out a studio for 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it was. I mean, it was great. I haven't made a record like that in forever. Some of the jazz records I make, we're lucky if we get 2 days, to do the whole thing, track it, mix it, put it out, So yeah, having that kind of time was great. And yeah, I think they still get the thrill of it. Yeah, because it's fun. It is fun to do, especially at that level. I mean, we were not suffering through these guys could play. There's no doubt about it. It's not like, we got to get these 3 actors suffer through they got to play their parts. And it's not that. They're very accomplished musicians. So they could play whatever they had in their head, they could play, which is great.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. How did Nigel's radio broadcaster for his guitar rig go in the studio?
He had all kinds of wacky stuff. Yeah.
Did he really bring wacky stuff into the studio too?
Yeah, because some of it had to be on this. It's Nigel, so you have to have those things. So there were some pedals that Chris might not use in his when he's just sitting at home playing guitar. I mean,
that was part of the movie too. Remember, he's like playing I don't remember what it was, some kind of warbly pedal. And then, David St. Hubbins is like, you're not going to use that in the song, are you?
Yeah, like the pizza pedal. That was all there.
Pedal, exactly.
Yeah, it was there. I mean, I saw it. It was there. And the guitar with the cheese. I mean, look, if you haven't seen the movie by now, I'm not blowing it. But, that's a real guitar. We used it.
That's
on the record.
Man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So the stuff you see in the movie, literally what you see in the movie is what happened. Even the people, in the movie where you see them in the rehearsal spaces, you see the guitar techs walking around. Those were our guitar techs. That was Suresh and Tom. Greta, our PA, was the PA in the movie. They were just there. It was so the people in the movie are kind of the people that were actually working on stuff.
That's great, man. That's really awesome.
I met them after the movie, so I didn't get to be in the movie, but it's okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you get to spend you got to really know them, which is really, really cool, man.
It's been really, really a good time. I've had a lot of fun doing the whole Spinal Tap thing. So,
yeah. And when will you be singing or doing interviews on Nigel's mic or on Derek's mic?
I don't know. I can switch. The next one I'll have to do a Nigel.
Oh, is it possible?
I mean,
I don't want you to blow your vocal setup, but is it possible to show the David St. Hubbins on the camera?
Yeah. Can you see it? Hang on.
Let's see. You might have to really put it up in front of the... Oh, go a little higher. Go higher. There you go. All right. I think we'll probably be able to get to see it. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Unbelievable. That's great. Oh, it's awesome, dude. Well, on that note, man, I just want to say this is so great to have you back on the show and to be able to talk about this. I'm sure there's going to be, I'm sure I've only taken these questions to 10, and I really should have taken them to 11 by the time I get done with this. But we got it. We're near the end. We're near the end of the interview here. I want to crack a joke where you go like, so what's that, like 50 hours left or something, which is one of my favorite lines from the first one. But Rockstars, if you haven't seen Spinal Tap 1, go see it. Go get it. Own it. It's your, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's your Bible for making records and rock records.
Exactly.
So you need to know it. And then the new one
You'll
is
be missing a lot of
hook.
studio references if you haven't seen Spinal Tap.
You'll be missing having a lot of fun if you don't go see it. So let the rock stars know where would you like them to go yourself, Steve, to learn, to follow you, sort of see what's the latest with your stuff. You've got, we'll have links, but if you want to mention anything specific.
Yeah, I mean, I have a website, stevegenewick.com, that I'm somewhat up to date on. I'm not a web guru, so but I try to keep it up to date. And then like Facebook, Instagram, I think Facebook and Instagram, it's Steve Genewick Recording Engineer, is kind of my business page, so to speak. And I don't post a ton, but there's stuff that'll pop up. It's kind of hard because a lot of times you can't post stuff while you're doing it. You have to wait for it to come out. And by the time it comes out, you forgot about it. So
right, exactly. And also, just to the point of making records is like a lot of times you can't do it because you're busy making the damn record,
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes we're just so busy in the studio. It's like, am I going to make a record, or am I going to post social media about making this record and then not make the record?
Yeah. And a lot of times you don't want to, if you're working with famous people, you don't want to below what they're doing and stuff like that. So you have to sign the NDAs and all that good stuff.
Which is kind of the opposite of working with indie people, where it's like you desperately need to blow what they're doing because everybody needs to know that they're doing something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, with the, if you're working on a record company project, it's all mapped out what's going to happen, and the record's probably not going to come out for 4 or 5 months by the time you're doing it. I'd be surprised, like the record I did the last 3 days, I'd be surprised if we see that record. Maybe in the spring, we'll see it, by the time it gets finished and all that kind of stuff. So
that's groovy. Yeah. So Rockstars, if you're, watching this now, if you're checking it out on YouTube or wherever you're listening, even if you have the ability for comments, just drop a comment in below too, and like let us know, what questions do you have? What questions did I not ask on this interview that you're like, Lidge, why did you forget to ask Steve that? And go ahead and drop it in there. We'll make sure that we get you an answer as best we can. Steve, absolutely. I got one closing question for you though. This is the same one I've asked you before. It's our hypothetical question. You get to take the Wayback Studio machine and go back and find younger Steve. And maybe at this point, you're just going back before you started working with Spinal Tap, and you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of Spinal Tap one day. What advice would you like to go give yourself, man?
I mean, I kind of, obviously I've had this question before. I think when you're starting out, don't get caught up on thinking that there's one thing you're going to do, because there's so many jobs in audio that I think I've made the reference before. You might be the best dialogue editor that's ever lived, but you didn't know dialogue editing existed till you got into it. So, when I got into this, I was convinced I was just going to be making rock and roll records for the rest of my life, and now I make jazz records and orchestral Christmas records and work on video games and whatever it is. So I think, and it's not that I didn't want to do those things when I was starting out. I didn't really know they existed, and I didn't know I liked doing it until I was exposed to it. So, you may think you want to make records, but you might end up making movies or doing music for video games or TV commercials or whatever it is. So there's so many audio jobs out there. I would say keep an open mind as to what you actually want to do once you get into it, and try a bunch of different stuff out. I mean, I love that I have a career so far where I get to do orchestral Christmas records with Trisha Yearwood and Spinal Tap
in the summer.
Within a month of each other, or whatever it was. So, and a video game in between that, and I mix all the music for a game called Apex Legend. So, and I get to do jazz records, and I get to work on the Oscars and the Grammys every year and stuff like that. So,
and we didn't even mention the other movies. Yeah. I mean, in your playlist, we've got Minions. You got to do that one. The Social Network
soundtrack
with Trent Reznor.
Yeah, those are all Dolby Atmos things. Recently, I just remixed for Atmos. I remixed Jaws and Jaws 2, the soundtracks.
Wow.
Those are out now, which is really fun to do. So
dun.
Yeah, literally I spent like 2 weeks and I was going back and forth between mixing old Spinal Tap and mixing Jaws.
And that was John Williams on Jaws?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jaws 2. Yeah. So you don't close your mind out to there's a lot of jobs in audio. And
now those remixes in Atmos are for the soundtrack of those movies, or do they actually
not
get included
not
in
for the film?
Right.
No, they're just soundtrack albums. Yeah, just soundtrack albums. Yeah. There is a playlist on Apple Music, and I'm pretty sure it's public, that Steve Genewick Atmos mixes. And
yep, we've got a link in the show notes too.
Yeah, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of I've done
and we've got the Spinal Tap records in the rock stars. But, to your point of the jazz records too, I mean, and we talked about this on the last episode, and you played me some Miles Davis while I was there in your studio, which was really cool to hear. But, you got to work on Miles Davis, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Freddie Hubbard, Grant Green, so many amazing jazz albums. And what was remarkable to me on listening to those to get ready for this interview, so I like many of us would be popping in, Apple AirPod Pros, and that's how I get my Atmos experience before I've got an Atmos setup on speakers. But I was really struck by how well those translate to Atmos for earbuds. I think you did a great job, because when I turned my head a little bit, it really, because of the nature of those jazz recordings and the way that you remix them for Atmos, it really retained this really cool spatial experience in the headphones. That's like, we don't get freaked out by hearing the vocal move around or something that you sometimes do when you hear pop records that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's if you have the head tracking on, is what you're talking about, where you actually hear it move, which is cool. I mean, I try to make it like, not everything has to be flying around. Not every Atmos mix, there's stuff moving and all that. I mean, honestly, most of them, there isn't anything doing that. I'm just trying to create space, trying to make it big and make it compelling. I like, even early on, we kept saying, we're not making an Atmos demo here. We're making a record. So if the record wants stuff to move and fly over your head, then do that. But if it's a jazz record, Miles Davis doesn't want to do that. It just wants to be big and open and hear the space between the notes and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for saying that. I'm glad that they translate in the headphones. I mean, I do listen to the headphones when I'm mixing in Atmos, but it's nice to hear in the real world that people are appreciating that. So
yeah, I mean, I look forward to having a speaker setup, but until I get there, it's going to be the earbuds, and so it's cool to
whatever
hear
it is, earbuds, soundbar. It's coming in cars, so it's still moving forward. I know a lot of people are like, I don't get it. It's like, well, you don't have to get it yet. You will.
That's actually, in a way, that's sort of the point. It means it's like sort of being delivered transparently in a way. Yeah, I think a lot of times we experience it without knowing that we were experiencing it too.
Especially
not a
if
lot
you're
of
on
times, but sometimes.
Yeah, if you're listening to Apple Music, it defaults to being on your phone. So if you're listening to Apple Music on AirPods, you might be hearing the Atmos mix unless you've gone in and physically turned it off yourself. So
yeah, indeed. Now with Spinal Tap's record, were there a few key moments where you guys did decide to go crazy with the Atmos?
Absolutely. Yeah, on both of them.
Can you give us one? Is it the Dancing Elves?
The Dancing Elves didn't. I don't know that anything moved on that. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. What's the one? There's one on Break Like the Wind where I kind of went a little nuts. I'd have to look at the titles again. But yeah, like Break Like the Wind, there's definitely some some stuff swimming
By the
around
way,
and all
rock
that kind of
stars,
stuff.
this is important for you to hear. First rule of the control room is break like the wind is not allowed in the control room. Second rule is if you're actually mixing break like the wind, well then hell yeah, it's allowed in the control room.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't remember. But yes, on the Spinal Tap records, there's definitely what one of my clients called magic tricks. Do your magic tricks. Make them go around in circles.
Do your magic tricks. I love it, man.
Yeah, there's
Dude, well, thank you so
there.
much for hanging with us on the show again. It's a pleasure as always, and thanks for playing me those mixes when I came out to come visit you and hear stuff in your studio.
Maybe I'll see you in January at NAMM.
Yeah, you never know.
It's where we see each other now. I know.
It's one of those places for sure. And then Rockstars, Thank you for hanging with us. If you're listening, come on over to the bright side where we're on video now. Come on over to YouTube or wherever the future of video lives, and you can check out this interview right there. And then also, if you enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe so you don't miss more of the interviews from the channel. The like button really actually helps the algorithm so that other people get to enjoy this interview like you do, and it's a great way to support the show. So much appreciated. And then once again, use the comments and let us know your thoughts on this. And if you have more questions about working with any of the artists that Steve's working with, just drop it in here and I'll make sure Steve Steve will be like, Lidge, you keep texting me. It's 2 a.m. What are you doing? But Steve, we got a question about Spinal Tap.
May not happen at 2 a.m., but if you ask questions, I'll definitely try to hop on and answer whatever I can.
Dude, you rock, man. Thank you so much for hanging with us. And I'll look forward to seeing you in person.
Thanks, Lidge.
Cheers, man. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who make this episode possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, Grace Design, and Picker. Check out the Spectra 1964 website for factory direct budget-saving prices on the STX 600, 100, 100D, and BBDI DirectBox. Check out my studio profile on the Picker app on iPhone or Android, and remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase at iZotope.com or nativeinstruments.com. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes below. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because it's a great way to help support this show. And I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Daria Tupesis. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.